Hey guys, welcome back. It's the end of March, I know that. I don't know what day exactly, but we're out here in the garage, and as you can see, I've got the front end tore apart on the Farmall H because we had a drip from the packing nut, which is typical after a rebuild of the water pump. You usually have to tighten it a few turns to get it to stop dripping after you get your test runs out. But we didn't put enough packing in there because I bottomed out the packing nut and I just wasn't comfortable with where we were at. So I went and got some more graphite packing, which is right here. Got it from my local Ace Hardware. It's 40209 graphite packing. It's an 1/8 inch by 24 inch length. So we'll put some more packing in the water pump. If you want to double check that video, just check it out. I'll put the link in the description below. Once we get that done, then we have to pull off the manifold and then the inspection cover for, well, we might not have to pull the manifold off. We might be able to get by without pulling that, but we have a drip coming out of the water pump inspection plate, or I'm sorry, the water jacket inspection plate. And I'm pretty sure we have the same issues that Squatch had. The gasket that goes on here, what he had happen with the Super M was the gasket had started to separate from itself because I put RTV on both front and rear of the gasket. So my guess is that gasket is separating from itself. So I ordered a new gasket. So we got to pull off the plate, clean up the gasket surfaces without trying to do a whole lot of damage to the paint, and go from there. So it's always something after a rebuild, you know, it's always little tiny drips and leaks here and there, but we'll get it taken care of. So I didn't show too much of the teardown portion because, quite frankly, I just did it kind of on a whim. I wasn't planning on working on this today. So I was out here and just did it. So maybe we'll start some video of the reassembly process and maybe putting more packing in the pump. But it's kind of where we're at. So you just got to deal with it. But that's it. I'm gonna eat dinner and I gotta take a nap before I go back to bed. So, or before I go to work. Blech. So we'll see you guys in a bit. Alright, figured I'd film a little bit of this process again. So what I do is I take the packing, I'll wrap it around the shaft and kind of make a mark with my thumb as to where it needs to be cut, leaving a little excess. And then it's just a matter of pushing it down into the water pump. And I've got a small pick here to help push it down in. And I can use the packing nut as well to help push it in there. And go with another layer, and each layer you try to stagger the gap in the packing material, so that you're not, so you're not coming around the shaft and you're touching the seam in the same place. So if the seam is at 12 o'clock, the next one I'll go 6 o'clock, and then I'll go back to 3 o'clock, and then over to 9 o'clock. So the last one was at about 6 o'clock. So we'll go ahead and put this in at 12 o'clock. Just try to work it in there as best you can. And every couple of rows or so, you got to test fit that packing nut, tighten it down and see where you're at. And that's what we're doing right now with this one. So I think this is probably good because it's getting pretty well tight, and I got at least 3/8, maybe a ½ inch of thread sticking out. So there's plenty of packing in there. I could probably go one more row, which is what I'll probably do. But the big thing you want to watch out for is there's this notch here in the impeller shaft that the drive dog has to line up with. There's a tapered pin that goes in that slot, or that notch in the shaft. So you got to make sure that that tapered pin lines up appropriately, that this packing nut isn't overlapping that. So we'll go ahead and back this out, and I'm going to put one more row in, just for good measure. All right. One more row. Now you can tighten this packing nut without removing the radiator and everything. And I tried, and like I said in the previous section of the video, it just wasn't, I wasn't satisfied with the fact that we pretty much bottomed out that packing nut. So that's why I chose to remove the radiator and add more packing. Sometimes that's just how it goes. Sometimes it's, 10 steps forward, 2 steps back. But luckily, everything was pretty much new, so it all just came right apart, and it should all just go right back together. So that should be plenty good. Go ahead and wipe off the excess grease here, because there is, some type of graphite grease in that packing. It's impregnated with that graphite grease. So that's done. We can go ahead and move this stuff here. Wipe up the grease on the bolster, and we can work on getting the radiator back in. Oh, well, first we're gonna put this back together. I gotta grab the appropriate fasteners. Okay, so we've got 2 springs that go on the 2 outer studs, and then we've got, see, I gotta double check to make sure this thing fits the appropriate way here. Okay, so I call it the dog bone, Got your dog bone. Got to make sure everything is lined up appropriately with the impeller shaft. Try not to scratch everything up too terribly bad. Then we can put our nut on the other side and draw our pin tight, and we should be good to go to set the radiator back in. Alright, now this is the iffy part. This is the difficult part, is getting the radiator in, because the fan shroud kind of has to go in at the same time the radiator comes down. So that's the most tricky part, and then not, you know, scratching everything up too terribly bad. That also presents a challenge, so let's give it a shot. And losing the rubber mounts is kind of a challenge too. So there's one. Didn't mean to walk in front of the camera there, but gonna do it again. Okay. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is put the bottom bolts for the shroud in place. Yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna do. That'll kind of hold the shroud in the spot it's supposed to be in. Hopefully I can do this without too much trouble. Gotta kind of set everything up here so you don't lose it. Now I didn't have to pull the alternator off to get this all out, but I'm most likely going to have to pull it off to get the upper brace back in place, because it's very difficult to get into this area and hold the bolt here, and the brace comes here, goes to the thermostat housing, and it's very difficult to hold everything in place while you're trying to push the bolt in. So most likely I'll have to remove the alternator, which isn't a big deal. 3 bolts and it's done. So why don't I do that just to get it out of the way. Okay, we've got the radiator back in. We've got the upper radiator support tight. We've got the hoses tight, top and bottom. So we've got, your lower radiator tube with 2 hoses, your upper radiator connection with just 1 hose. Everything for the fan and the impeller drive is tight. The only thing we have left to do is put the springs and nuts on the bottom, which we have to go through the bottom of the bolster to do, and put the front wheels on, or I should say the front rims and tires. And then we have to tackle the inspection plate for the water jacket. Now I'm going to try and do this without removing the manifold, and it should be doable, but the challenge is going to be getting all of the gasket surfaces clean on the block to put the new gasket on. So that will be the challenge, but hopefully it won't be too bad. And I'm hoping that the water pump doesn't drip anymore, and I'm about 99.874% sure that it's not going to have any more problems. So let's keep moving. I'm going to put the springs and nuts on the bottom of the radiator studs, and then we'll go from there. Alright, we've got everything back together as far as the radiator and the front wheels goes. So we're going to go ahead and pull the bolts for the water jacket cover. Try not to lose them. And there are a couple that I will have to do by hand. Those are the ones up front by the governor. So I'm just working on getting all the lock washers off. There's a few studs towards the center, and the rest are bolts. So okay, so that one's broke loose. And that one's broke loose. I got a lot of wrenches, a lot of combination wrenches. I got a few sets of ratcheting wrenches, but what I don't have are the swivel head standard ratcheting wrenches, or SAE, and that would really come in handy right now. And I'm kicking the camera and just not used to having this big tripod next to me. It's just part of part of doing restorations is getting everything back together and then taking care of the last couple drips that appear. So thankfully, so far, these are the only 2 drips we've encountered. And granted, it was a lot of work just to put more packing in the front of the water pump, but could have been worse. You know, we could have had, you know, one of the seals in the transmission leaking, or front crankshaft seal. You know, for that we would have had to pull the entire front bolster. So we're getting by kind of lucky here. And my plan is to get a razor blade underneath here and try to cut away into the gasket. Oh, maybe don't even need to do that. Oh, that's right, we still got this center bolt here. And there's a few paint chips on the water plate, the jacket, the water jacket cover. But that's not a big deal. Not too worried about a couple of paint chips, especially in this area, because it's going to be so kind of hidden behind everything. Huh. Well, we'll go ahead and get all this old gasket off. That's going to be the difficult part, is getting the old gasket off, and then we're going to have to soak up some of the coolant that's in here. Actually, what I could do is just pull the block drain. Why don't I do that? It's going to create a mess, but be a lot easier than trying to mop up what's inside there. So I'll pull the block drain, which is here, and then we'll start scraping off the gasket. Okay, we've got the inspection plate off, we've got the gasket scraped off, and I've got the gasket remains scraped off the inspection plate. So now we just got to clean all this up with some solvent and get the surface nice and clean, and try to clean out the little remnants of leftover gasket there, and then we can put a bunch of RTV on it and give it another shot. So hopefully this gasket doesn't have the same issue as the last one. So stay tuned for that part. Okay, we've got the surfaces all cleaned up. I've got my gasket in place on the plate. I also took and put some RTV into the holes for the bolts. So we're going to go ahead and try and get this thing in place here as best we can. Whoops, sorry about that. Okay. Now the biggest thing about this, a lot of times people make this mistake with RTV, is they want to go ahead and tighten everything down all the way immediately, and that actually is causing you more problems, because what it does is it squeezes all that RTV out. So what you want to do is snug it down, probably, I would say a turn past finger tight, and then let it set for a few hours, and then come back and tighten everything, excuse me, I got the hiccups, tighten everything up as best you can after it's set up a little bit. So start putting in nuts and bolts. And then I think we can, after this is finalized, I think we can put in the new carburetor. And I'm not gonna worry about filming the details on installing it, but I will touch on a couple things regarding the carburetor. So I'm going to go ahead and finish putting all these bolts in, and then we'll talk about what we have to do with the carburetor. Okay, change of plans here. I figured I'd show you on the bench since we've got everything laid out. So one of the problems with putting a Super H carburetor on a regular H is the intake pipe is much smaller in diameter, as you can see, than the carburetor intake. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen this hose, and then I'm going to take this hose, which conveniently enough is the same ID inside diameter as the OD or outside diameter of the factory rubber hose for the factory H carburetor. I'm going to take that and slide it over, and it also is the correct size for the carburetor. So I'm going to basically use this factory H hose as a spacer, or as a sleeve, I guess you could say. And then I'm going to just slide this hose right over the top of it. Obviously I'll cut it to fit, you know, lengthwise so that it looks like it's supposed to be there. But that is the remedy I'm going to do, instead of cutting the end off and then welding a expanded end on to mate up to this carburetor. That way, if for whatever reason, if this doesn't work out, or if I want to go back to an H carburetor, we can always just, you know, take the rubber hose off, and then this will slide right back on. So that's the plan with the Super H carburetor. Essentially, a Super H carburetor is the same castings as an M carburetor, only there are different venturi, some different jets, and that's pretty much it. So it's essentially an M carburetor, just with a smaller venturi and some different jetting. But that's what we're gonna do with that, and I'm not gonna do it now because I'm gonna leave the carburetor off until I gotta be careful not to hit this tripod on something, until the RTV on that water jacket inspection plate cover sets up. Sorry, I'm trying to maneuver this tripod around, but that's hopefully that should take care of the issue. The water pump should be plenty sealed up now. That packing nut, and then the inspection plate here on the water jacket should be plenty good. So we got all our bolts on and everything's snug down. It's not tight. Again, we're gonna wait to tighten it until everything is set up. And it's a little cold out here, so I might even wait until later on tonight. It's about 1 p.m. now, but I'll probably wait until after dinner to come out here and tighten everything for a final tighten. So that's where we're at. That's all I've got. So hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned, and hopefully it won't be too long before the tin work video comes out. Yeah, I just don't have anything else to say. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching and wrenching with me, and you know, like, share, comment, subscribe, all of that, and I hope to see you guys back. So stay tuned.